Part 232. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei-Shi Niang. Chapter 2312. Jia returned home, but Jianqiang was not at home. Jia didn't pay attention, thinking that he was going out to play. In the past few days, Jia didn't accompany the boss day and night. She didn't go home, and she didn't need Jianqiang to go to him. Business, I didn't expect Jianqiang to take this opportunity to take care of other ding-dong business. Of course, these were all things Jianqiang confessed to Jia later. If Jia knew at that time that Jianqiang was taking care of other people's business when she was still worried about doing business every day, she would kill him. With Jianqiang away, Jia felt peaceful, so she sat down and read the information her boss had left for her. However, there were a lot of terms in the information, and Jia was confused. She couldn't even figure out this disease or that disease, let alone not to mention understanding the pharmacology of these drugs and their efficacy. Jia remembered what her boss had said to her earlier and felt that she really needed to make a desperate move. Tomorrow morning, she would run to the bookstore, buy a few medical books, and study hard. By the way, you also need to buy a dictionary. If you don't know the words, you can look them up in the dictionary. Otherwise, if you go out, you won't be able to say that this tincture or that amidine is wrong, and you won't be laughed out of your teeth. Those who are doctors, Jia knows, they will look down on the most people. In addition, she also thought that in the future, instead of running business, she would have to print business cards. Like Lu Ligan, she would have business cards with others, so that when they need to contact her for business, they can take her. Jia didn't know anyone in Hainan. The people she knew most, besides Yilin's mother and Yilin, were Lu Ligan and Zhang Chen. Jia felt that she couldn't do what Zhang Chen did before, but he could draw. Paint, whatever you paint looks like. If you paint a chicken, people will think it is a duck. If you paint a duck, people will think it is a piece of shit. But Lu Ligan, Jia felt that she could learn from it. Lu Ligan did very well in advertising before. How did he do it? When they were eating in the corridor, Lu Ligan would often brag about it. Jia felt that you can learn from him yourself. Jia also decided that since she has become a medical representative and wants to burn her boat, she must wash her hands in a golden basin like the heroes on TV. From today on, Jia will never sleep with a man again. In the past, she relied on sleeping with men to make ends meet. From today on, she had to make ends meet based on her own ability, not her own body. Jia made up her mind and felt that the incomprehensible things in front of her became easier to understand, so she looked at them over and over again. Time passed little by little. After 10 o'clock, after 11 o'clock, after 12 o'clock, Jianqiang still didn't come back, and Jia was still reading the information. Jia herself was a little surprised. Why did she like to study so much? When she was studying, she had never been so diligent. At that time, she would doze off as long as she picked up a book. Today, she can actually read these things, and they are so long. Time. For this reason, Jia felt a kind of satisfaction in her heart, a kind of satisfaction that she had never had before. At about 1 o'clock, Jianqiang came back and was shocked to see Jia at home. Jia asked him where he had been and why he came back so late. Jianqiang said, "Didn't you say you weren't at home today? Let me think about it. It was not interesting to come back alone, so I went to the video room to watch the video." Jia didn't ask any more questions. She asked Jianqiang to sit down and told Jianqiang about her decision to become a medical representative. She also told him that from today on, she would no longer receive customers or sleep with men, and neither would you. No need to solicit business anymore. Jianqiang froze there, confused. Jia told him, "I have already thought about it. I still have a basic salary of 500 yuan every month. I am very busy every day and have to run business. I may not even have time to come back to eat. I don't care what you do. If you say you don't want to do anything and are just going to sleep every day, that's okay. I'll pay Yilan's mother 300 yuan to pay for your food. You can just go to her place to eat. I still have 200 yuan left with me to eat a packed lunch. If you can't sleep at home, then go find some work, anything. Anyway, starting from tomorrow, we will all be serious people with our own serious jobs. Jianqiang thought about Jiajia's words from beginning to end. He thought about it and said, why is it 500? Isn't there 3,000? 3,000 can be reimbursed with an invoice. I will go to the hotel to get the invoice. You can invite anyone. After writing it randomly, they don't know that the boss is not stupid enough to ask the deans, have the people in our unit invited you to dinner? He wanted to ask, should they consider him a lunatic and kick him out? Even those who have really eaten, no one will admit that they have eaten. Can't we use the 3,000 for ourselves? No, Jia told Jianqiang seriously, I won't do such a thing. If I can't even spend 3,000, it's because I don't have the ability. I won't misuse this money, let alone embezzle. By the way, what I just said is corruption, embezzlement of business expenses. Jianqiang scratched his head and said, well, I'm hungry. Let's go have a midnight snack to celebrate that you've become a medical representative, okay? Jia laughed and said, this is okay. I'm hungry too. The two of them went downstairs and went to the food stall owned by the real estate owner in the back for a late-night snack. Although the food of this owner was not as delicious as the original owner, Jia felt that after all, he had opened a company and had a big business. He knows a lot of things. If you don't understand a lot of things in the future, you can ask him. The next morning, the boss was going back to Zhejiang, so Jia went to Wanghelu to see him off. When Jia arrived in the boss's room, the girl was still there. The boss was very happy to see Jia and asked her to come into the room quickly. The girl had already told the boss about the money Jia gave her. The boss asked Jia to go in and said to the girl, come on, let's go back to the bridge. You can take the money Jia gave you yesterday, give it back to her. The girl took out the money and gave it back to Jia. The boss said to Jia, it seems I saw you right. However, this is really not what I should take. Jia didn't accept the money and told her boss. Hi, what did I say yesterday? I said this is a meeting gift for you. I am your boss. If I don't keep my word, how can you trust me in the future? When the boss said this, Jia could only thank the boss and take the money. The boss gave the girl another money and 200 more, and told her that this is to reward you for being honest. If you didn't tell Jia about this, she probably wouldn't ask. You could have collected the money twice, but if you didn't, that would be a good thing. After hearing this, the girl smiled from ear to ear and happily accepted the money. The three of them went to the restaurant below for morning tea. After finishing the morning tea, the boss asked the girl to leave her mother's phone number and agreed to find her next time she came to Hiken, and then asked her to leave first. The boss and Jia continued to sit in the restaurant. Jia told the boss that she had decided not to do ding-dong from today on. She was going to print business cards and go to the bookstore to buy books and study. The information given yesterday, she doesn't understand many things. Starting from tomorrow, she will officially start running business. The boss was very happy to hear this. He told Jia that if he didn't understand something, he could just call his boss and ask him. By the way, the money you spend on printing business cards can be reimbursed in business expenses. The boss took his bag, took out 3,500 yuan, and told Jia, this is your first month's salary and business expenses, so that if you want to treat guests or something, you can get it from here. For expenses, remember to put together the 3,000 invoice and give it to me when the time comes. Jia was a little surprised and asked, I haven't started doing business yet, so is it appropriate to take money? The boss said that logically, both basic salary and business expenses are paid at the end of the month, but I am the boss and the boss has the right to let you advance. I can trust you. The boss said, looking at Jia and smiling. Jia was puzzled by his smile and asked, Boss, why are you laughing? The boss said, Jia, you probably don't even know that by giving you these 3,500 yuan, I am actually digging a trap for you to jump into. Jia didn't understand and asked, why is it a trap again? The boss smiled and said, Jia, I can see that you are actually a very serious person. I gave you the 3,500 yuan first. Do you feel that the pressure on you is getting greater? You must put it down. Is this done? Jia thought for a moment and realized that was really the case. She nodded. The boss smiled and said, Look, what is this if it's not a trap? Jia also laughed. After seeing her boss off, Jia went to print the business card first, then went to Xinhua bookstore on Jifang Road and bought a dictionary and several medical books to read. When she got home, Jianqiang was not there again. She didn't know where he was. Jia sat down and started reading. When she really read these books, Jia found that she was even more confused than before. There were some things that she seemed to understand last night. But when she read the books today, she realized that what she thought she understood last night was completely wrong. I am getting more and more confused. This is how to do? He couldn't understand it by reading a book or looking it up in a dictionary. Jianqiang didn't even know a word. He didn't know as many words as Jia do. Asking him was a waste of time. The boss said he could beat him if he didn't understand. But brother, it costs money to make calls and receive calls, and they are all long-distance calls, and the phone bills are exorbitantly expensive. Even if she is not willing to spend the phone bill, Jia thought to herself, how can she understand something that she can't even understand when she picks up the phone? This is how to do? Jia was sitting there thinking, and suddenly it occurred to her that she had a customer. Wasn't she a doctor from the Provincial People's Hospital? The surname was very strange, Peng. When he wrote it to Jia, he asked Jia what the character was. Jia said disdainfully, if you still test me on this, isn't this the word Feng? As a result, he laughed and said to Jia, this is not Feng. Look at the place below next to the word Zhao. Is it different? This is pronounced Peng, which is pronounced the same as the word Peng next to it. I am Dr. Peng, not Dr. Feng. Do you understand? I am from Zhejiang and the United States. Jia didn't know which office Dr. Peng was in. She only knew that he was a surgeon at the Provincial People's Hospital. There would be several doctors with such strange surnames in a hospital. She just had to find him. If she found him, she could ask him for advice. Jia made up her mind and put the information and the books in her bag. She decided to go see Dr. Peng this afternoon. Thank you Hoo for your monthly vote. Thanks for all the votes and reading. Have a good evening everyone. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2313. Downstairs came the sound of the iron gate of the courtyard being opened, the clatter of a tricycle, and the voices of Jianqiang and Yilin's mother. Jia stood up, walked out, leaned on the corridor railing, looked down, and saw Jianqiang. After pushing the tricycle in, Yilin's mother squatted in the back compartment, spread her hands apart, and tightly grasped the fence of the tricycle. Jianqiang parked the car and looked up to see Jia. He pulled the brake and was about to go upstairs. Yilin's mother climbed off the tricycle and shouted, "We will eat here soon." Jianqiang pointed upward. Yilin's mother looked up, saw Jia, grinned, and called, "Jia, come down here to eat." Jia said yes, I will come down. Before Jia went downstairs, Jianqiang had already run up. He excitedly told Jia that he had found something to do. What's the matter? Jia asked him. Yilan Ma and I teamed up to help people pull and transport things. Yilan Ma is a local, and people trust her and are not afraid that she will lose the things. She is responsible for promoting business, and I am responsible for delivering things by bicycle. Where to pull it? Jia asked. At the used furniture market, when people buy furniture, don't they need a tricycle to deliver it? There is also the Boa Road wholesale market. When people buy goods, they have to take them to the station to get on the train. We have done 3 orders in the morning and made 32 yuan. When Jia heard this, she became happy. She took out the book she bought from her bag and showed it to Jianqiang. She told him that she planned to go to the hospital to consult a doctor in the afternoon, and that her boss had already paid her basic salary and business expenses. I told Jianqiang about the advance to myself. When the two of them talked about these trivial matters, they were very happy and relaxed. They felt as if they had taken a long breath. From today on, they can do things openly, no longer need to be so sneaky, and do not need to be afraid of the Joint Defense Team, security guards, and other people. Those bad guys are here to bother you. This was an experience they had never had before. For the first time in so many years, they felt at ease. Jianqiang couldn't help but hug Jia. He felt that Jia smelled very good today. He was no longer like before. Even when he was sleeping in bed at night, he couldn't help but think about the guest Jia received today. Yes, when Jia did something, Jianqiang couldn't help but wonder if she and her guests had done the same thing just now. The two hugged each other, feeling a little entangled with each other, and couldn't help but kiss. It wasn't until Yilan's mother told them to have a good meal, that the two separated, looked at each other, and couldn't help laughing. If mom didn't scream, it would be broad daylight and they would probably go to bed. After lunch, it was almost 1 o'clock. Jianqiang and Yilan's mother, wearing straw hats, went out on tricycles. Jia saw that it was still early. At this time, even in the hospital, the doctors were still on their lunch break. From 2 to 3:30 after the lunch break, it is the climax of patient treatment. Jia feels that it is the best time to go to the hospital and find Dr. Pang around 4 o'clock. First, there were fewer patients to see the doctor, so Dr. Pang could take time to answer her questions. If possible, Jia felt that it would be best to invite Dr. Pang to dinner, so that she would have plenty of time for him to teach her. Although Jia doesn't know whether the cost of treating Dr. Pang to a meal can be reimbursed in business expenses, but even if she pays for the meal herself, Jia thinks it is a good deal, and she doesn't need to pay tuition for anything she studies. Jia found a notebook and a pen. She opened the information left by her boss and read it page by page. She took notes on the things she didn't understand in the notebook, and then wrote about herself in the notebook. I wrote 3 pages of notes on things that I couldn't understand when I was reading the book. After she made these preparations and saw that it was almost time, Jia went out to the Provincial People's Hospital. Jia arrived at the outpatient hall of the Provincial People's Hospital. It was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. People were still coming and going in the outpatient hall of the hospital. There were outpatient rooms in every passage, and there were 2 doctors sitting in each outpatient room. There were patients queuing up outside the door. Jia was a little confused and didn't know where Dr. Pang was. She walked into a passage, and as soon as she stretched her head at a door and looked inside, a nurse yelled at her to get in line. The people queuing outside the door also thought she was coming to open the back door and jump in line. After scolding her all the time, Jia quickly said, "I'm not here to see a doctor, I'm here to see someone." Before she could ask the nurse where Dr. Pang was, the nurse rolled her eyes at her and cursed, "Go away, there is no one you are looking for here." Jia came back frustrated and could only retreat into the hall. She saw us serving the people counter in the hall. There was a nurse standing inside. There was no one in front of the counter. The nurse was standing there, biting her nails. Jia walked over and asked her. "Excuse me, where is Dr. Pang?" "Which Pang doctor?" "There are two Pang doctors here." "What's the name you are looking for?" the nurse asked. Jia was dumbfounded again. She didn't expect that there would be two such strange surnames in this hospital. It was really crazy. However, she only knew the other person's surname was Pang, so how could she know his name? Jia immediately became anxious. When she was anxious, she became smarter. She thought that the nurse must have made a mistake. She quickly told the nurse. "It's not the face of the face, but the Pang that looks like the character Feng. The nurse understood and said, "He is not here in the outpatient department, but in the inpatient department." When Jia heard this, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. In the inpatient department, there were no patients in his office. The inpatient department was all busy with nurses. Only when the nurses couldn't handle things, they would call the doctor. Jia quickly asked. "Excuse me, is Dr. Pang here now?" The nurse shook her head and said she didn't know. "You should go to the inpatient department and find out yourself." Jia went to the inpatient department. It was not the time for visits now. The door to the inpatient department was closed. Only the small door of the reception room next to it was open. An old lady was sitting inside holding the door. The old lady had a straight face and her nose there is a pair of reading glasses hanging on it. The reading glasses are like a person's pants falling off to his heels, and the frame has fallen to the tip of his nose. As soon as Jia entered, she stared at Jia with a pair of cloudy eyes on the mirror frame, as if Jia was a fly and she was about to drive her out. Jia said that she was here to see Dr. Pang. When she heard that Jia was not a family member of the patient, but was here to see the doctor, the old lady's face looked a little better and she asked Jia, "Who are you from Dr. Pang?" "He is my uncle," Jia joked casually. The old lady's face became a little gentler again, and Jia quickly grew from a fly to a relative of a doctor. The old lady took the registration book and asked Jia to register. Fortunately, Jia was careful in her work. She was at the nurse in front and asked, "Here comes Dr. Pang's name, otherwise, the secret will be revealed again now." Jia filled out the form and asked the old lady, "Where is my uncle?" The old lady told her that the surgical ward was on the first floor. As soon as I walked into the corridor, there was a strong smell of Lysol. The surgical ward was simply a concentrated display of human disasters. Those lying on the hospital bed had their eyes, heads, or even their entire heads covered. They stood up, with only two nostrils and two eyes exposed, and some had bandages on their hands and legs, with one foot hanging high on the shelf at the head of the bed. Along with the smell of Rasool, what rushed towards Jia was the sound of moans one after another. The patients after taking the anesthesia couldn't bear the pain and screamed, which made Jia's head grow bigger. She stood in the corridor and looked around, not knowing where Dr. Pang was. A nurse happened to come out of the ward. Jia asked her, "Where is Dr. Pang?" The nurse looked at Jia up and down alertly, and Jia quickly said, "He is my uncle." The nurse then raised her head and said, "Go to the end, the doctor's office." Jia walked toward the corridor. The ward doors on both sides were open for ventilation. Jia didn't dare to look either way. What she saw was miserable. She walked to the end of the corridor and stood at the door of the doctor's office. The door was closed. The transom glass above the door was covered with a piece of white paper, so she couldn't see inside. Jia knocked on the door, and a weak voice came from inside. "Sound, come in." Jia pushed the door open and walked in. Dr. Pang, who was sitting there, saw her. It turned out that his legs were resting on the glass table. He was taking a nap with the fan blowing. He immediately put his legs away and sat upright in the chair. He frowned, his face darkened, and asked sternly, "How did you come?" When Gia saw the other party like this, she felt angry. "Why the hell are you pretending to not be welcome?" Gia calmed down and said, "I'm pregnant, it's yours." Dr. Pang's face suddenly turned pale. He stood up, walked behind Gia, stretched out his head to look into the corridor outside, closed the door, and spoke. When he walked back, even his voice trembled. How is it possible? How could it be so unprofessional? Didn't you refuse to do it without that?" Gia suppressed her laughter and said with a cold face, "How is it impossible? Who knows whether that kind of thing is a fake product or whether it has expired? Why, do you want to admit it? Then do you want me to give birth to the child? Let's see, doesn't look like you." No, Dr. Pang said quickly, "we have something to discuss. Come on, you sit down first." He diligently pushed Gia to his chair and sat down. He was already sweating profusely, but he said, "Come on, warm it up. Come on, blow on the fan." He turned the table fan on the table to Gia, thought about it again, and said quickly, "Oh, it's not good for pregnant women to blow fans." Fawningly, he turned the fan a little more straight so that it wouldn't face Gia. Gia couldn't help it anymore and giggled. Dr. Pang was puzzled by her laughter. Gia said, "I lied to you. I'm not pregnant. You're such an old thing. You can't squeeze out a drop even if you squeeze for a long time. If you have the ability, let me pregnant." Gia thought Dr. Pang would be angry when he knew she had lied to him. Unexpectedly, he breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. While laughing, he wiped the sweat from his head and said to Gia, well done, well done. Look, I was scared to death." Not only was his forehead covered with sweat, but his back was also wet. Dr. Pang walked in front of the table fan, blocked it, and let the wind blow on his back. He asked Gia, "What do you want from me?" At that time, medical representatives were still very new. They had never even come into contact with doctors like Pang. There were only a few thousand people in the country, and they were all concentrated in big cities. Unlike now, there are about 300 people in the country. There are tens of thousands of medical representatives, and they can be seen in every hospital, large and small, including hospitals in the county. It can be said that I caught a good opportunity when I was doing this business at that time, Gia and Zhang Chen said. Zhang Chen nodded, yes, at that time, even insurance companies were good companies, and you had to open the back door to get in. Sometimes when I look at the children today, I feel a little pity for them. We have squeezed through every crack in their lives, so there is no chance for them, Gia said. Thank you Brokeback Mountain for the reward of 2 fishes. Thank you, Huaxin Yongxiao, Huar and the boy, Sand Dust Mood, Captain Jim, I see Glutton, it's really annoying, Zipanjiang 1, Jinhui Raiwichi, Sudden Mom, the setting sun shines on Mo Sheng, the air is inhumane, O0 surrender and lose half monthly tickets for 0O, Leo, Tamagotchi, Yuingzi, Lemon Zigma Sequin Suspension Juice, Book Friends 201802241122201712, Book Friends 0220324185843375. Thanks for all the votes and reading. I wish you all good health. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2314. Gia and Dr. Pang said that they are now the medical representatives of a pharmaceutical factory in Zhejiang. Dr. Pang doesn't know what a medical representative does. Gia said that he is responsible for selling drugs to every hospital. Dr. Pang laughed and said, "You are a salesman, a supply and salesperson, and a medical representative. You act like a people's representative and a party representative. Do you think you are Hong Chang-ching? Hong Chang-ching is the party representative in the movie Red Detachment of Women. The Red Detachment of Detachment tells the story of the Kayanja detachment in Hainan. The song The Water of Wankan River is clear and clear can be sung by almost every Hainanese and mainlander on the island. Of course everyone knows Hong Chang-ching." After Dr. Pang finished laughing, he told Jia, "I am just an ordinary surgeon. Our hospital purchases medicines only at the discretion of the dean and vice dean, so you have no use for me." Jia said, "You misunderstood. I came to you not to sell medicine, but to be your student. As you know, I don't know anything about this profession. When I meet a doctor and they ask me something, I feel like a doctor. Like an idiot, please teach me." "What, no more ding dong. Do you want to clear your name?" Dr. Pang stared at Jia lustfully and asked, "I can teach you, but what are you thanking me for?" Jia said, "I can treat you to dinner." "I don't want to eat your food," Dr. Pang said with a playful smile. "Then what do you want to eat?" "You don't know what I want to eat from you." Dr. Pang still stared at Jia. Jia looked at him and said, "I know, but don't even think about it. I've already washed my hands." Dr. Pang laughed and said, "I don't want to eat your hand." "You can't eat anywhere, you don't have to eat," Jia objected. "Then I won't teach," Dr. Pang said. "Will you teach me?" Jia stared at him and asked him. Dr. Pang shook his head, "I will definitely not teach him." Jia was annoyed. She took out the notebook from her bag, slapped it on the table, and shouted, "You have to teach me even if you don't teach me. Don't think I'm so easy to get rid of." Dr. Pang looked at her and asked with a smile, "Why, you still want to scare me with the fact that you are pregnant? You tried the same trick twice and it didn't work." "Okay," Jia said, "then I will open the door, make a big fuss, say you made me pregnant, and bring your colleagues and leaders over. This will be the final check to prove that I am not pregnant, right? What effect will I have on you?" Jia stared at Dr. Pang, and Dr. Pang stared at her. Finally, Dr. Pang's eyes softened and he said, "Okay, I was joking with you just now. I won't suffer any loss by accepting a beauty like you as my student. Well, what do you want to know?" Jia laughed heartily and said, "That's pretty much it, Teacher Pang." Jia opened the book and asked one question after another. Dr. Pang answered one by one. When it was time for dinner, Jia asked Dr. Pang to go to dinner. Dr. Pang said that he was at work and couldn't leave. "Either way, are you there? I'll eat in the canteen here." Dr. Pang said, picked up the phone on the table, called the nurse at the nursing station, and asked the nurse to come over to get the meal ticket and help him go to the cafeteria to get food. There was a nurse running in the corridor, and Jia and Dr. Pang said, "I told them, you are my uncle." Dr. Pang nodded. The nurse came in, and Dr. Pang told her, "This is my niece, she just came from the mainland, please help me pack 2 meals and a few more dishes." The nurse took the meal ticket, waved it to Dr. Pang and said, "Then you can buy our dinner together." Dr. Pang said, "Okay, and you plucked 2 more hairs. You are so beautiful, not just 2, but a handful." The nurse went out with a smile. After dinner, Jia continued to study with Dr. Pang. She felt that once learning started, there was no end. When she was learning, the problems were not getting fewer and fewer, but more and more. Until 9 o'clock in the evening, when Dr. Pang got off work, Jia was still full of questions. Dr. Pang and Jia said, "I will be working late shifts tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I will go to work at 9 p.m, will you come?" Jia said, "I will definitely come. Well, there are fewer people on the night shift, so I can teach you a little more." Dr. Pang told Jia that he also hoped that Jia could come in the evening. Jia returned home and saw Jianqiang lying on the bed, already asleep and smelling bad. He hadn't even taken a shower. Jia woke him up. Jianqiang sat up and looked at Jia, stunned for a while. Then I asked, "What for?" "I went to take a shower. I stank all over," Jia said. Jianqiang laughed. He said he was too tired. He rode a tricycle all day today. He fell on the bed and wanted to take a nap for a while, then fell asleep. Jia sounded a little distressed, and she was in a good mood today. Jia said, "Let's go, I will help you wash." The two of them went to the bathroom at the end of the corridor with a wash basin and towels. As soon as the water touched Jianqiang screamed and said it hurt to death. It turned out that he had been exposed to the sun all day and his skin was peeling. It hurts like fire when it touches water. Jia helped him wash it little by little and very carefully. That period was the best time for our relationship. Brother Zhang Chen, I don't know whether you understand it or not, but both of us felt that our future was very promising. As long as we worked hard, we were considerate of each other and respected each other. The help is really better than when we first fell in love, Jia and Zhang Chen said. Zhang Chen asked, "What happened next?" Then, Jia smiled bitterly, "Then it was found out that I was sick. At first, I thought it was caused by my own carelessness. Later I found out that it was Jianqiang who passed it on to me. It was infected by those women, the two of us had a big fight, and I never let him touch me again. It took many years for this disease to be cured. However, I can no longer have children. I don't know why, so I have no interest in men at all. I don't let Jianqiang touch me, but he still goes out to steal food. Later I figured it out, since you don't let people touch you, you can't suffocate people to death, just let them go, as long as I can't see them." The next day, Jianqiang went out with Yilin's mother early in the morning. Jia was alone at home, reading and taking notes. She didn't go anywhere. She even asked Jianqiang to get her business card back after it was printed. Yes, at around 9 o'clock in the evening, Jia still went to the People's Hospital to learn from Dr. Pang. That night, Dr. Pang was very well behaved at first, but after 11 o'clock, he started to act rude. He hugged her, touched her, and wanted to take her to the connected room next door, which was the doctor's duty lounge, with a bed. Of course, Jia refused. Dr. Pang begged her and said he could pay her. Jia said it didn't matter how much he paid, and told you that I had washed my hands in the golden basin. Dr. Pang smiled playfully and said it didn't matter if I washed my hands. It's fine if I didn't wash them there. Jia was so angry that she slapped him in the mouth and told him, "If you do this again, I will scream. Look at how old you are, you can be my dad, and you're still so cool." Jia scolded him, and Dr. Pang scolded him, "It's not like I teased you until you know it now, and it's not like you and I have never slept together. The past was before, the present is now, and you can't sleep with me again in the future," Jia told him. Dr. Pang scolded her for being a prudish person. Jia said, "Yes, I am a prudish person. I hope that I can become a real prudish person while pretending to be a prude. If you respect me, you will still be my teacher. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will treat you to dinner. If you don't respect me, I will treat you as an old gangster. I have many ways to deal with the old gangster." After such a scolding, Dr. Pang finally understood the situation and behaved himself. Jia studied with him for a week. He worked the evening shift, and Jia followed him. He worked the morning shift, so Jia got up early. When she thought she had basically mastered the knowledge she needed, she ran to those. When you sit in the office of a dean who is a doctor and chat with them, you will not be wrong. Jia decided to start a business, but she was still confused about how to start a business. She had never done such a thing before, how could she know? She thought hard and remembered that when Lou Ligon first started advertising, he used the stupidest method, sweeping buildings one after another. Later, his business gradually expanded, and Gia decided to follow Lou Li's example. Rod, she started running from hospital to hospital, no matter how big or small, even small private clinics. She visited all the hospitals in Hiken. After running like this for a month, Gia knew a lot of people, but when it came to business orders, those people were very polite when they saw her and talked and laughed with her, but when it came to practical problems, they all made excuses to avoid her. Gia finally understood that these guys were treating her as message and condiment. It was so boring to sit in the office, but a girl ran in. She was quite good looking and she always talked according to her. How could they not welcome her and be unhappy chatting with her? Gia felt that she was being entertained by them. From their eyes, Gia could even see that these men all looked sanctimonious, but in fact, they were all waiting for what Gia would give in exchange for their business. Gia called her boss and told him her troubles. The boss encouraged her and said, "You are already doing very well. I haven't even touched the door of the hospital in a month, but you have met so many people in a month, this is your ability, you have fully blossomed, and now you need to make a key breakthrough. As long as you make one order, you will have experience and know what to do next. Also, people in the hospital are all connected with each other. Think about it, you are in Hiken, the provincial hospitals in Hiken, and the city and county level hospitals below require training and expert consultation. When relatives and friends are hospitalized, they have to establish relationships, and don't they all have to deal with provincial hospitals? As long as you find your next restaurant in Hiken, they can help you introduce several restaurants." Gia felt that what her boss said made sense. Now, she just couldn't let them treat her as message and go to a different hospital every day. Instead, she had to find a hospital and keep an eye on him. Spending time there every day was the key breakthrough that her boss said. But which one should be chosen as the focus? Gia thought about it and thought that she should choose the Provincial People's Hospital. The Provincial People's Hospital is the largest hospital in Hainan. If she succeeds in the Provincial People's Hospital and then goes to other hospitals, she will be famous. This is her real business card. Also, the boss is right. Which one of the president or vice president of the Provincial People's Hospital and the presidents of the following hospitals doesn't want to flatter them? If they were willing to help her and introduce more hospitals to her, wouldn't she really be able to fully blossom? Thank you to Lao Chantang, Shi Yitan, Hurricane 0669, Daos Hung 123, Kong Kong Pan Pan, Sudden Mom, LCS 0001, Robin Granite, 4 + 1 = 5, Nan K Yimeng 79, Buletin's Thread, Jinwu Lonji, and How for your monthly votes. Thanks for all the votes and reading. Have a good evening everyone. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2315. After making up her mind, Gia went to the Provincial People's Hospital to find Dr. Pang. Dr. Pang told her that the vice president in charge of drug and medical device procurement in their hospital was named Qin. If you can deal with him, your drugs can enter our hospital. Gia asked Dr. Pang, what did Dean Qin do? Of course I'm a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. How can I stay in the hospital? Dr. Pang said. No, I mean, what kind of doctor is he? Gia asked. Thoracic surgery, Dr. Pang said, still wanting to eat Gia's tofu. He stretched out his fingers on her chest, pressed against her t-shirt, and scratched along her cleavage, and said, just one cut from here, to here. His fingers touched her belly and poked her. After saying that, he quickly retracted his fingers and chuckled obscenely. Gia glared at him, but now that she wanted something from him, there was nothing she could do about it, so he had to let him have the final say. Jia asked, "What does he like? By the way, has he had any extraordinary surgery?" "Amazing surgery? Haha, it scares you to death. He participated in the country's first heart transplant operation." Dr. Pang smiled. "Wow, so powerful," Jia shouted. "Shit. In fact, whoever got him, he was just watching from the sidelines. He is not even qualified to hand over surgical forceps," Dr. Pang said disdainfully. "He turned out to be a model worker in the production team of Nanda. He stepped on dog shit and was recommended to Shanghai Second Medical College to become a worker, peasant, and soldier college student. His teacher was Professor Fang Lide. Do you know Fang Lide?" Jia shook her head and Dr. Pang said, "He and Zhang Xiais are both professors at Shanghai Second Medical College and doctors at Shanghai Rujin Hospital. They only completed their studies in April 1978. The doctor who performed the first heart transplant in our country, as a student, Lao Qin and Xiao Qin at that time, only observed and learned on the spot. But there was no way. He was at the scene and was Professor Fang's student. This became his capital. From then on, he boasted everywhere that he participated in the country's first heart transplant operation. After graduating and returning to Hainan, it soon became the first knife of Hainan thoracic surgery. Actually, it's just good luck that he participated. I don't have such good luck. When it comes to the operating table, shit, his hands are not as stable as mine." Dr. Pang was cursing, but Jia was too lazy to pay attention to him. Instead, she carefully memorized some of the key words he said: Shanghai Second Medical College, Rujin Hospital, April 1978, National First Medical College. Heart transplant surgery, Zhang Xiais, Fang Lide, etc. "Do you want to get to know him?" Dr. Pang asked. "If you want to get to know him, I will take you there and say that you are my niece." Jia quickly said yes. Dr. Pang stood up, came over and put his arm around Jia's shoulders. Jia struggled twice but couldn't get away. The two of them walked to the door, and Dr. Pang let go of her. The hospital office is on the 5th floor of the outpatient building in front. The two of them climbed to the 5th floor. Jia thought about it. She told Dr. Pang, "Forget it, you go back, I will go there alone." "Why?" Dr. Pang asked. "I'm thinking, if Dean Qin knew that you and I were related or knew each other, would there be some things he wouldn't be able to say? Would it be better for me to have nothing to do with the people in your hospital?" As Jia said, Dr. Pang was stunned for a moment. It made sense after thinking about it. How could the man named Tan be willing to let more people know about the back door? If he knew that Jia was his relative, he would refuse to purchase even if he was easy to purchase. Dr. Pang said, "Yes, go to the last office on the left corridor by yourself and don't mention me." Dr. Pang said, looking around to see if there was no one around. He spanked Jia on the buttocks. After his hand fell, the palm of his hand did not leave. The spanking turned into touching. Jia twisted her buttocks and got out of the way, laughing. "Gone." Dr. Pang looked at her back and shook his head, feeling empty in his heart. He put his hand in front of his nose and smelled. The more Jia refused to let him touch her, the more itchy he felt in his heart. Jia walked along the corridor to the last office. The door of the office was closed, with the words "Vice Dean's office" posted on the door. Jia reached out and knocked on the door, and a voice came from the door, "Come in." Jia pushed the door open and saw a lean man in his 50s sitting inside. Jia quickly bent over with a smile and shouted, "Hello, Dean Qin." Vice President Qin sat there, looking at her, expressionless, not even nodding his head. Vice President Tan has dark skin and high cheekbones, and his face is exaggeratedly thin, as if he had to peel off the skin, use a knife to remove all the meat from the bones, and then sew the skin back together to become like this. This is what is commonly known as a person with no flesh on his face. In other words, he is the kind of person who is difficult to talk to, and he is also unsmiling. Gia's heart skipped a beat and she immediately added 10,000 cautions, but her face was full of smiles. She walked over and just sat down across from Vice President Tan's desk when she saw the glass on Vice President Tan's desk. There was only 1/3 of the water in it. She stood up immediately and said, "Oh, Dean, you are too busy and don't even have time to pour the water. Let me pour it for you." As she spoke, she stood up, picked up Vice Dean Chen's cup, looked around, and saw a hot water kettle placed on the coffee table between the two wooden single sofas behind her. She walked over and filled the cup. After getting the water, I took it back. Vice President Chen kept looking at her, still without any expression. When Gia came back, put down the cup, sat down again, looked at him and smiled, he asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Gia. I just came from the mainland. I'm a medical representative from a pharmaceutical factory in Zhejiang. When I arrived in Haikan, I wanted to get everyone's help and advice. People's Hospital is the largest hospital in Hainan. I was the first, of course I want to visit Dean Chen." Gia always had a smile on her lips. She took out her business card and their pharmaceutical factory's brochure from her bag and handed it to Vice President Chen. Vice President Chen did not accept it and looked at it quietly. Gia still smiled and put the business card and brochure on the desk in front of Vice President Chen, while secretly looking at Vice President Chen. Vice President Chen glanced at the business card and picture album, reached out and pushed them to the side without picking them up. In fact, as soon as she came in, Gia discovered an enlarged black and white photo hanging on the wall of the office. At this time, Gia pretended to find it for the first time and shouted, "Oh, Dean, why do you also have this photo here? I have seen this photo before." With that said, without waiting for Vice President Chen's reaction, she stood up and walked to the photo. She saw that in the photo, a patient was sitting on the hospital bed, with 7 people standing beside him, 2 older ones. There are also 5 young people. In the upper left corner of the photo, there are black characters that read, "April 1978, Shanghai Rujin Hospital." Gia's mind raced, and she immediately connected the words she just remembered with this photo. Gia knew that the patient on the hospital bed must be the person who had just had a heart transplant. These 2 years old, the big one was Zhang Xia's, and the other one was probably Fang Lide. Gia didn't know who it was, but she pointed randomly. "This is Professor Zhang Xia's, this is Professor Fang Lide." Vice President Chen couldn't sit still. He stood up and asked as he walked, "Do you know them?" Gia didn't say she knew him or not, but pointed at a young man in the photo, turned around, opened his eyes wide, and exclaimed with an exaggerated expression, "Oh my God, Dean, this is you, isn't it? This is you." Vice President Tan had already walked to Gia's side and nodded. Gia felt secretly happy, knowing that she had been fooled correctly and that the other party had taken the bait, so she continued to act and shouted, "Oh my God, it's amazing. I didn't even know it. Dean, so you also participated." An imperceptible smile slipped across the thin face, and Vice President Tan asked, "What did I participate in?" "This is the first patient in the country to have a successful heart transplant." Gia pointed to the patient on the hospital bed and said, then made a circle with her fingers, "These are the doctors who performed the surgery on him." "Oh my God, Dean, I don't know, but it turns out you also participated, you are the first in the country." "It was also the first case in Asia," Dean Chen added. "At that time, there were no cases of successful heart transplantation even in Japan. We were the first." "That's amazing," Gia exclaimed. "By the way, little girl, you said earlier that you have seen this photo before. Where did you see it?" Vice Dean Chen asked. "Who knows where I have seen it," Gia cursed in her heart, but she couldn't say this. She could only think rapidly in her mind, where, where, she saw the 4 words Rujin Hospital on the photo, and an idea came to her. Of course it's at Shanghai Rujin Hospital. You are the pride of their hospital, #1 in the country, no, in Asia. Jia said, her back was almost sweating. She had never even been to Shanghai, how could she know about Rujin Hospital? If this thin monkey continued to ask, Jia felt that she would be exposed. Fortunately, Vice President Qin, instead of asking further, he nodded. Jia's words really deceived her. In 1977, Shanghai Rujin Hospital successfully performed the country's first liver transplant on a 42-year-old male patient with advanced liver cancer. The following year, in April of 1978, after more than 6 hours of surgery, China's first human homogeneous orthotopic heart transplantation was completed, which was also the first heart transplantation in Asia. These 2 incidents caused a sensation across the country at the time, and were indeed the pride of Shanghai Rujin Hospital. The photo on the wall was taken by a reporter from Shanghai's Liberation Daily at that time. Vice President Qin asked Jia to go back to his desk and sit down. The harsh lines on his face became softer. He said, I didn't expect that you, a little girl, have a lot of experience at such a young age. Jia smiled and said, you do what you do and love what you do. Since I am engaged in the pharmaceutical industry, I must know some of the great people and things in this industry. I just didn't expect that I would be so lucky to meet Dean Qin today. Tell me, what do you want from me? Vice President Qin nodded and said. Jia almost said, I am here to promote the medicine produced by our factory, but she held it back. She understood the principle of playing hard to get. Men often like to play hard to get with women. They don't know that women actually know something better than they do. It's called playing hard to get. Jia knew that just because they met for the first time today, she didn't know the depth, and directly said that she wanted the other party to purchase their medicine, which was impossible to succeed. If she tells her purpose now, it will make people feel that everything is fake, and even the good impression the other party had towards her will be gone. It is true to strike while the iron is hot, but if you attack randomly, the result will still be a pile of useless iron lump. Vice President Tan's door has been opened for her, but if she is too reckless, the door will be closed soon. Moreover, if it is closed at this time, if you want him to open it again, it will not be that easy. Jia felt that she wanted to keep the door open. As long as the door was open, she could go in and out, and finally get what she needed. Jia smiled at Vice President Tan and said, nothing specific, I just came to visit and get to know seniors and big shots like Dean Tan. I feel very happy to be able to sit here and talk to you, it's an honor. Vice President Qin finally laughed and said, I am not a big shot. Of course, Dean Qin, thank you for taking the time to receive me today. In the future, I will come often to ask you questions, okay? Jia looked at Vice Dean Qin and asked. Vice President Qin nodded. Jia stood up and said with a smile, then I won't disturb you. I'll take my leave first. Thank you Brokeback Mountain for the reward of 2 fishes. Thank you Musicking, the chair in the world, Jians, the little man in the little man, Fang Xiaoluo, looking at the plum blossoms and not being thirst, Ling Yuner, Xiao Shen Nian Fang 48, Mao Xiong is not a bear, holding the flag at night, I come by occasionally, Ken I don't want it anymore, Sudden Mom, you know whether a book is good or not, The Deepness of the Road, The Boss of Lelagia, The Ling of the Lake, Zipanjiang 1, On the Road 2006, De Ji Lao, Wu Yue Hao, Lu Sandeo, Xiang J, CVHGK. Guzio Kyokiu, Benware, U20051224, Tianying 1978, Udai, Take a Look at Leisure, Book Friends 1505161323363922, 20180415180305945945, 1611222135017991 16040316353132920190110213524468 21706080811700 monthly ticket. Thanks for all the votes and reading. I wish you all good health. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2316. Every day, Jia suppresses her urge and thoughts to go to the People's Hospital and to see Vice President Tan. She tells herself that the time has not come yet, the time has not come yet, wait a little longer, and uses a sentence from the book. It seems that I persuade myself that a little impatience will mess up a big plan. You are planning a big plan now, haha. Ji Unqiang and Yilin's mother still ride a tricycle to work as porters every day. It is said that they are doing very well. Ji Unqiang excitedly told Jia that now, they have many shops in the old furniture market and Boa Road wholesale market. We are all familiar with each other and have established a business relationship. If there is business, they will not call others to come, but will torture me first. Ji Unqiang said that they are going to expand their business scope to the aquatic product terminal. The aquatic product terminal has a large volume of short-distance transportation like this. When Ji Unqiang said this, he was very serious. He didn't say it was work, but he liked to talk about business, as if what they were doing was an amazing big business, just like Ji Unqiang and Yilin's mother working together. He wants to ask the powerful to join forces and go to the aquatic products wharf to work. He must say that the business will be expanded to the aquatic products wharf. There are also words such as short-distance transportation, business relations, and business scope. He likes to use these words from newspapers. However, Jia quite liked hearing what he said. Many times, she herself would speak like this. The language styles of the two of them had changed, which showed that their lives were really different from before. Their current work and the original nature of the work was completely different, and they were walking on a broad road. Jia and Ji Unqiang said, "Okay, I hope your transportation business and performance will grow every day." Ji Unqiang nodded and said, "Yes, it will definitely happen. Our business volume will increase exponentially. By then, I will be worried about our own lack of human resources." Jia still reads at home every day, but she goes to the bookstore again. This time she buys books on thoracic surgery and cardiovascular medicine. She wants to recharge herself and try to read as many books as possible every day. Learn a little and strive to take one step a day. After a period of enlightenment from Dr. Pang, Jia now looks at these boring medical books. It is no longer that I don't recognize them, and they don't recognize me either. Instead, she has a feeling of admiration for each other. After reading for a long time, Jia feels that she is really interested in these medical books, especially when she thinks that her future is tied to them. She feels endless motivation. Jia studies hard every day, so that the next time she chats with Vice President Tan, she will have more topics to talk about. At the same time, Jia feels that even while studying, there is nothing wrong with her. If you don't understand, you can pick out a few questions and ask Vice President Chin. Who would reject a beautiful girl with her big eyes looking at her shamelessly asking questions? When talking in front of them, men always feel huge self-satisfaction. Anyway, the men Jia has come into contact with before are basically this kind of people. When they first talk about it, it will make you feel that as long as he stamps his feet, Heiken will tremble. Later, even the earth will tremble. His country is everywhere, and he needs his guidance. After 3 days of self-repression, Jia felt that time was almost up. 3 days were enough for Vice President Tan to let down his guard and realize that he really had nothing to do. If he was in a hurry to beg him, going to him by himself would not be so utilitarian. If time passes any longer, people may forget you completely, and the door will close again, and you will have to find a way to open it again. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Gia went to the People's Hospital. When she arrived on the 5th floor, she was still very uneasy when she was walking in the corridor. She didn't know if Vice President Chin was here today, and she didn't know if he saw her. What will happen? She walked to the door of the office and stopped. Gia took a deep breath first, and then knocked gently on the door. "Please come in." Vice Dean Tan's voice came from the door. Gia sighed and pushed the door open. When Vice President Chin saw it was Gia, his eyebrows twitched, his eyes flashed brightly, and he said, "Why is it you?" Gia noticed all the subtle movements of the other party. She felt confident in her heart, knowing that her judgment was correct and the timing was perfect. She smiled and said, "Why, it can't be me. Did Dean Chin forget about me?" "No, no." Vice President Tan smiled. "I mean, why haven't I seen you these days?" "Oh, I just came from the mainland. I am not familiar with the place. I have been running around here and there during this period to get familiar with the environment. I have always wanted to come over to visit the Dean again. Firstly, there are too many things to do, and secondly, I am afraid of disturbing you. Just when I passed you outside, I thought, don't bother him, no matter what the disturbance is, even if the Dean kicks me out immediately, I will definitely come." Gia was chirping, and Vice President Chin looked at her, nodded, and said, "Come if you want, don't be so polite, hurry up, sit down." Gia didn't sit down, but said a little annoyed and coquettishly, "Oh, Dean, why is your hospital so stingy? You are so busy, but you don't even have an assistant. Look, the table is in such a mess, and there is no one to help tidy it up." After saying that, Gia quickly helped to organize it with hands and feet. Vice President Tan leaned back on the chair, crossed his fingers with his hands, and hugged the back of his head. He sat there, watching Gia put things on his desk. The documents, books, and stationery on the bed are all neatly organized. Gia asked, "Where is the rag?" "I will help you wipe the table." Vice President Chin quickly said, sit down, sit down, sit down quickly. If you keep doing this, I will pay you a salary." Gia smiled sweetly at him and said, "I am willing. If the Dean doesn't drive me away, I will come here every day to help you sort it out." "I can't bear it." "Sit down," Vice President Chin said. Gia then sat down, and Vice President Tan asked her, "What have you been busy with during this time?" "We in business are busy with nothing else. We are busy running from this hospital to that hospital, seeing this and that," Gia said. "After you left that day, I took a look at your factory's products. They were pretty good. By the way, what do you do as a medical representative? If I understand correctly, do you promote your factory's products?" Deputy Chin the Dean asked. "Yes, he is actually just a salesman. For the sake of gimmicks, he called himself a medical representative. Didn't he learn from those big foreign companies? People who don't know, think that we are the same as representatives of the People's Representative Party, thinking that we are Hong Chang-ching," Gia said with a pout. Vice President Chin laughed. Gia thought that she also wanted to go deeper on this topic, so that she could get to that point soon. She could ask directly, "I wonder if I have the luck to let the products of my factory enter the people's market." Hospital. Unexpectedly, Vice President Chin did not continue. He just said, "No matter what I call it, it's all work." He immediately changed the subject and asked Gia if she was studying medicine. Although Gia was disappointed, she couldn't show it, but she still smiled like a flower. "No, I'm from Zhejiang province," Gia said. Oh, Vice President Chin was really curious now and asked, "You majored in art? Then why did you end up working in a pharmaceutical factory?" Gia quickly said, "I actually hate drawing. I have no choice but to learn it because my parents forced me to do it." Gia said that this job was just a way of setting the stage, just in case the other party asked her to paint, and then her secret would be revealed. She said she hated painting, but even if the other party asked for it, she could decline it politely. Actually, my wish since I was a child was to be a doctor, but I never went to medical school. I went to a shabby Zhejiang university. After graduation, I didn't want to paint anymore, so I went to a pharmaceutical factory. If I couldn't be a doctor, I could always smell it. It smells like medicine, Gia said, and Vice President Qin laughed. By the way, Dean, I heard that in foreign countries, it is now possible to perform surgery to install stents in coronary arteries for cardiovascular diseases. Is that true? The blood vessels are so thin. How can I not put a stent in them? I can't figure it out. Dean, you are an expert in this field, tell me, is this true? Gia asked. Yes, this has indeed been done. Moreover, this will be a trend in the future, that is, minimally invasive surgery. I have seen information on this, which is really eye-opening and has changed my original understanding of surgery. A scalpel can achieve better results than our disembowelment, Vice President Qin said. You mean you can do cardiovascular surgery without surgery? How is that possible? How did they do it? Gia shouted. This is a long story, Vice President Qin said. Gia looked at her watch and saw that it was past 5 o'clock. Gia said to Vice President Ten coquettishly. I'm really curious, Dean, can you teach me? It's almost time to get off work. Can I treat you to dinner? Please tell me carefully. Vice President Qin was silent. Gia begged, Dean, please do me a favor. I don't know anyone here. I eat alone every day. It's super boring. Besides, I've been thinking about this bracket for several days. My head is almost pounding, but I still can't figure it out. Dean, you must help me solve this question, please, please. Gia clasped her hands together and kept bowing to Vice President Ten. Vice President Ten was amused by her. He looked at his watch and said, well, there's really nothing I can do about you. Gia giggled. Vice President Qin stood up and said to Gia, let's go, then let's talk while eating. The two of them went downstairs and out of the outpatient clinic building. Gia walked towards the gate. Vice President Tan stopped her and asked her where she was going. Gia said, go to the gate to get a taxi. Vice President Qin's head, which looked like a pulped walnut, shook to the right and said, I have a car. Take my car and go. Gia quickly ran over with broken steps. The two of them arrived at the parking lot and got into Vice President Qin's Bluebird car. Vice President Qin asked, what do you want to eat? Gia said, I'm not familiar with this place. It's up to you. Anyway, I can treat you anywhere. Then we can go to Heel Seafood on Lonkan South Road, okay, Vice President Qin asked, and Gia said yes, the seafood is the best. Thank you Zixi Zi, Hu, Cao Xiaoman, Hu Sansi, Book Friends 202204144174621875, Book Friends 201812161143511583 for your monthly votes. Thanks for all the votes and reading. Have a good evening everyone. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2317. Heel Seafood on Lonkan South Road is in a 4-story private house. The house is newly built. The floor and walls look like they are not yet dry. There are simple sheds in the front and back of the house. The shed in the back is the kitchen, and the shed in the front is a seafood pool and water table. There are pots of dirty dishes on the floor, and a large bucket of detergent next to them. The two women are sitting here, talking for a moment. They also kept washing the dishes. From the number of dirty dishes taken away, you can see that the business here is booming. There are 4 rows of glass cabinets that go up in a ladder-like manner, and all kinds of seafood are kept. In each seafood cabinet, there is an oxygen pump bubbling with water, transporting oxygen inside. In front of the seafood pool, there is a row of plastic pots, which contain snails, nautiluses, geoducks, oysters, etc. In each pot, there is also an oxygen pump nozzle. Next to the seafood pool is a row of pools covered with white tiles. There are 3 helpers standing here. The seafood after weighing in the seafood pool is immediately sent here for processing and cleaning by them. Not long after Lonkin South Road was opened, it was still desolate on both sides. This house stood alone here. The surrounding land was flattened and turned into a parking lot. There were cars parked here and there. There was a person running back and forth here. Just instruct people parking their cars not to block the passage. Vice President Chin parked the car, and the two of them got out of the car. As soon as they walked to the seafood pool, a woman came to greet him. It seemed that Vice President Chin was a regular customer here. When she saw him, she greeted him and asked him where he was. Vice President Chin said to. The woman turned around and yelled into the house in Hainan dialect. Immediately, a roar rushed out from the house. The woman told Vice President Chin, "Number 5 on the 3rd floor." Vice President Chin nodded. We walked to the seafood pool together. Vice President Chin asked Gia what she wanted to eat. Gia said, "I don't even understand, so you should order it." Vice President Chin ordered a medium-sized lobster of about 1 pound to be steamed with garlic, safflower crabs stir-fried with ginger and green onions, shrimps with salt and pepper, red fish steamed, and an dongfeng snail. The woman asked what kind of drink she wanted, and Vice President Chin rolled her eyes at her. The woman giggled and said, I understand you, great aphrodisiac. This is a locally produced medicinal wine. The name of the wine is called aphrodisiac wine. It is available in half-caddy bottles and 1-caddy bottles. People are accustomed to calling the half-caddy packs small aphrodisiacs and the 1-caddy packs called big aphrodisiacs. The taste is very similar to the later Lagui wine. The ingredients should be similar. Gia quickly said that I don't know how to drink and asked for 2 cans of coconut juice. Entering the house, there is a bar at the entrance. The original frame structure is retained on the 1st floor. The columns have not even been painted yet. The walls between the columns are not built. It just so happens that the 1st floor is used as a hotel. The lobby, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th floors above, are all private rooms. Gia walked into the stairs and almost vomited. Someone drank too much and vomited directly on the stairs. Although the vomit had been removed and the stairs were flushed with water, the pungent smell still lingered here. For someone who had just been in the hospital and whose nose was filled with the smell of Lysol, it seemed even more overwhelming. The two of them quickened their pace and went upstairs. When they reached the upstairs corridor, they saw the sky outside and breathed a sigh of relief. While waiting for the food, Gia supported her chin with both hands and looked at Vice President Chin with a pair of eyes that were seeking knowledge. Vice President Chin took a sip of tea and started speaking. He said to Gia, "Why is minimally invasive surgery the future trend?" Because minimally invasive surgery causes minimal trauma to patients. This trauma refers to the medical structure and psychology, but it brings the same curative effect. Minimally invasive surgery in foreign countries now actually relies on a laparoscope, which is a device with a miniature camera that can enter the human abdominal cavity, or through imaging technology, the doctor uses a computer screen. Do you know about computers? Gia shook her head. Our hospital does not yet have computers, but foreign hospitals already have them. The computer has a screen like a TV. Through ultrasound and X-rays, etc., you can see the situation inside the patient's body on this screen, which is different from traditional surgery is different. It is done by the doctor looking at the screen and operating the equipment. Do you know how big the wound in minimally invasive surgery is? Vice President Chin asked. Jia shook her head. Vice President Chin said, "It's just a little bigger than a pinhead." "Wow, how is that possible?" Jia shouted. Vice President Chin smiled and said, "I thought it was impossible at first, but after reading the information, it overturned my idea and even my understanding of surgeons. When we say surgeons, they are all like knives, it's just a knife. I didn't expect that people no longer use scalpels when performing surgeries. I think minimally invasive surgery can be called abdominal surgery or imaging surgery." "Are they already so advanced?" Jia asked. "Yes, so we have to catch up, your pharmaceutical factory and our hospital, we all have to work together." Vice President Chin said this as if he was giving a report, but Jia felt that what he said was right. She kept nodding her head with admiration in her eyes. Jia's expression made Vice President Chin feel it was very useful and opened up his conversational box. Vice President Chin said, "You asked me earlier about my stent implantation, right?" Jia still nodded. Vice President Chin said, "Stent implantation technology is one of the minimally invasive surgeries. Let me tell you how they do it." "Okay, I really want to know, Dean." Jia said, putting down the hand supporting her chin, straightening her waist, and placing her hands flat on the table, like an obedient primary school student. Vice President Chin smiled slightly and said, "The path for vascular stent implantation is generally to choose the right femoral artery, find the puncture site, use a dermatome to make a small opening, and then puncture with a puncture needle. If you see blood returning, it means that the puncture needle has entered the femoral artery. The puncture is successful, and the puncture guide wire is inserted through the hollow tube of the needle. Then pull out the puncture needle, insert the sheath along the puncture guide wire, the sheath of the sheath. The sheath is divided into an inner sheath and an outer sheath. Pull out the puncture guide wire and inner sheath, leaving the outer sheath in the skin and blood vessels. Between them, a channel is established, just like this." As he spoke, Vice President Chin raised his left hand, making a circle with his index finger and thumb. He picked up a chopstick with his right hand. Vice President Chin gestured with his left hand and said, "Did you see it? This is the outer sheath, which establishes such a passage, which facilitates the entry and exit of various guide wires, balloons, and stents." He said, using the chopstick, inserting it back and forth in the circle. Jia almost laughed out loud. She saw this action, which was too obscene. Jianqiang used to do this action quietly when soliciting customers. The other party understood it at a glance, but Jianqiang used the index finger of his right hand. Instead of chopsticks, including when they ridiculed a certain guy because he was too small, they also said that he was like chopsticks, just go in and stir it twice. Seeing Jia suppressing a smile, Vice President Chin was stunned for a moment, then understood. He also smiled and said, "Don't think wrongly." Jia shook her head playfully from side to side and said, "I didn't think wrongly." "Tell me, Dean, why did I think wrongly?" "Do you still want to listen?" Vice President Chin asked with a deliberately serious face. "You want it, Dean? Hurry up, don't stop." As soon as the words came out, Jia felt something was wrong and blushed. Vice President Tan also realized it. Now they thought about it together and both laughed. Vice President Chin sipped his tea, cleared his throat, and continued. "The next step is to send the contrast guide wire and contrast catheter into the blood vessel through the sheath channel. This contrast guide wire is a guide wire that can be controlled by the doctor and can be flexibly bent and turned. It passes through the crisscrossing blood vessel network from the blood vessel at the puncture site. It travels retrograde to the large blood vessel. The angiography catheter follows the guide wire and snakes through the blood vessel until it reaches the focus. point, which is where the blood vessel is blocked. Use a syringe to inject a special contrast fluid, or developing fluid, into the catheter. At this time, this part of the blood vessels appears on the computer screen like a map. Human blood vessels are like rivers. Where it's clogged and it's clear on the screen. Gia rested her chin with her hands again and stared at Vice President Tan. This time, she was really fascinated, as if she was listening to an adventure story. Vice President Chin continued, after the angiography is completed, the blockage point is found, the angiography guide wire and catheter are pulled out, and then the guide wire and guide catheter are inserted to reach the blockage point. Through the guide catheter, the balloon is delivered to the blockage point. Use a pressure pump to pressurize the balloon. The balloon becomes larger and opens the blocked blood vessels. This is predilation. After taking out the pre-expanded balloon, the balloon with the stent is inserted through the catheter again. When it reaches the pre-expanded blockage point, use a pressure pump to pressurize it. The balloon opens the mesh-type stent and fixes it to the blockage. Click, and finally take out the guide wire catheter, balloon, and, by the way, the outer sheath. The entire stent implantation operation is completed, and the patient can be discharged soon. Awesome, Gia applauded sincerely, but, all this sounds very far away. No, the popularization of medical technology will be very fast. Think about it, what people fear most is death. How can we avoid death and prolong life? Of course, it is through medical means. Therefore, this stent implantation surgery, think about it, how many people are waiting in our country, including those with power, they are the ones who want to introduce it most. I think it won't be long before major hospitals in Shanghai or Beijing will introduce stent implantation surgery. As Vice President Tan said, Gia kept nodding her head, thinking that what he said was right. Vice President Chin said, by the way, I have told you so much, but I actually have a suggestion. Say it, Dean. I think that after the introduction of this technology, it will definitely be a business opportunity. We will definitely not be able to make the stent in China at once. As long as we can't make it ourselves and need to import it, the price will be very expensive. I estimate that a stent will cost several dollars, 10,000, it's more expensive than our surgery fee. Aren't you a factory? You can consider going in this direction. Gia's eyes lit up. She also thought this was a business opportunity. She shouted, great, I will tell our factory director. This meal cost the two of them more than 520 yuan. When paying the bill, Gia thought that Vice President Tan had behaved like a master from the moment he arrived here, and she thought that at least he would be polite and compete with her to pay the bill, but he didn't. He sat there picking his teeth with a toothpick and showed no sign at all, watching Gia buy the bill. When Gia bought the order, she asked the waiter to issue an invoice. The waiter came over with the invoice and change. Vice President Chin stretched out two fingers and said, give me the invoice, and took the invoice. Gia was stunned for a moment, but quickly recovered. Gia felt heartbroken after spending so much money. At the same time, she didn't know what to do with the meal without an invoice and whether she could be reimbursed. But she still felt that today's meal was a good deal. First, after the meal, she and Tan, the relationship with the Vice Dean has obviously become closer, and the two of them have made an appointment to have dinner together tomorrow. I will detain you then. Wherever you are, I will go directly to pick you up, Vice President Chin said to Gia, and Gia agreed. There is another gain. Gia feels that she has really figured out the complicated issue of stent implantation surgery today. Thank you Brokeback Mountain for the reward of 2 fishes. Thank you to Fire Phoenix Magic Mirror, Tianying 1978, Lao Shenzi Sang, Fang Feng, why can't I change my name, the administrator on the 3rd floor of the library, take a look at it, Zixi LW. Norvi, Purple Hay, Romantic Sakura, and turn over the books frequently, How can we not have the same name? Nevin Moore, Zizhew, The Setting Sun Shines on Mo Shen, Captain Jim, Galen's Great Sword, Dragon, Book Friends 2-0171122204203851, 2018052311285760, 2021109140700893887090, 201911021135467118, 201711192342197449, 202002031632014442 monthly tickets. Thanks for all the votes and reading. I wish you all good health. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2318. Vice President Qin sent Jia to the intersection of Binya village. Jia got out of the car and walked in alone. When passing by the shop, Jia used the public phone there to call the boss's big brother. What, you were just having dinner with the deputy director of the People's Hospital? When the boss heard that Jia said that he had just had dinner with the deputy director of the People's Hospital, he shouted, "You are so awesome, you actually put the deputy dean has done it." "It's not settled yet," Jia said. "Even after we had dinner together, we haven't mentioned the purchase of medicines yet." The boss laughed loudly on the phone and said, "Do you think that if someone is short of this meal, he will go to anyone who invites him? A meal of more than 500 yuan is too expensive. We have to pay for it tomorrow," Jia said with a sad face. "It may cost so much money again." The boss was overjoyed when he heard this. He said, "Please feel free to ask, even if it is 5,000, I will give you special approval if the funds are not enough." Whatever batch was approved, today's invoices were all taken away by him. "I don't even have an invoice," Jia said. "It doesn't matter, I trust you. When the time comes, you can make a note and write an explanation, and I will approve the reimbursement for you. You just need to keep an eye on him," the boss said. Jia told her boss about the stent on the phone. She told her boss, "I think Dean Qin is right. This stent will definitely be a business opportunity in the future. Can our factory research and develop this? Why should we develop this? This is a matter for other equipment manufacturers. We are a pharmaceutical factory. We only produce medicines, not equipment," the boss said. "But, the profit is very high," Jia defended. "Our profits from generic drugs are also very high. With that kind of money, I might as well develop a new drug," the boss said. "Don't worry about this. Just keep an eye on this vice president." Jia said oh and hung up the phone. She felt in her heart that her boss was a bit short-sighted, but he is the boss, not you. What can you do? At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, Vice President Qin asked Jia, and Jia called back. Vice President Qin told Jia, "At 6:30, you wait at the place where you got off the car last night, and I will pick her up." "You?" Jia said yes. The next day they went to Dalongwang to eat stir-fry Japanese raccoon dogs and mountain turtles stewed with poisonous snakes. During the meal, Vice President Tan still talked a lot, but did not mention the purchase of medicines. Jia felt a little anxious. She said several times she wanted to lead in this direction, but was brought back by Vice Dean Qin. Gradually, Jia understood that people were really taking advantage of her. "I understand very well in my heart, but I am just pretending to be stupid." There was a 2-day pause, and Vice President Qin didn't hold Jia any longer. At the weekend, Jia couldn't help it anymore and ran to the hospital to find him. When he saw Jia, Vice President Qin said, "Oh, I have been really busy these 2 days. I also said that I had time on the weekend and was about to detain you, but you came over." That night, they drove to the crater to eat mutton hot pot. "This guy just hangs me like this without saying a word or talking about drug procurement. In fact, if you think about it, I'm just in the business of drug sales, not drug procurement. How come I come to you again and again, and are you dating? Jia said angrily to Zhang Chen. Zhang Chen said, I think he is waiting for you to ask him. Yes, I was stupid at that time and had no experience in this area. Jia smiled. Jia couldn't bear it any longer, so she finally spoke directly and brought up the matter of drug procurement. She said that she was in Hiken and had not completed any business yet. The tasks given to her by the factory were very stressful and she fell asleep every night. Before I could sleep, I asked Vice President Chin if he could help me get the medicines from their factory into the People's Hospital. Vice President Tan didn't seem surprised at all when he heard what Jia said. Sitting there, he seemed to have known that this time would come. He nodded and said, I will ask you about this matter tomorrow. Jia was full of hope and invited him to the VIP building for dinner the next day. She thought that Vice President Tan would talk about it during the meal, but in the end, he seemed to have forgotten about it and kept talking about it. Jia was secretly worried because she just didn't mention the drug purchase. Finally, she couldn't help but ask, did the dean help me ask about the drugs? I have already told them, and they agreed to study it, Vice President Chin said lightly. When Jia heard this, she knew she had been fooled. It was obviously something you could decide alone. Yesterday, she said she would help and ask questions, and today she said they agreed to study it. Who wants to study it? Who are they? Jia resisted and did not get angry. She thought that she had already paid such a high price and could not be quick. Even though she was depressed, she still had to smile. For the next 2 days, we continued to eat, but there was still no progress. All 3,000 yuan of Jia's business expenses were spent, but the drug purchase was still unresolved. Every time I asked, Vice President Chin still said that he said that he wanted to study it, but he didn't have any certainty. He didn't say when the study would be completed, and he didn't tell her who they were. Jia felt extremely depressed and called her boss. The boss laughed softly and said, this old fox really doesn't let go of the rabbit before he sees it. After saying that, the boss hung up the phone. Jia was stunned while holding the phone. Of course she could hear what the boss meant from his words. She knew what he was talking about when he said that he would not let go of rabbits or hawks. If the boss hung up the phone so quickly, he was actually staying. The subtext is that you know this kind of thing and you don't need me to teach you. Jia even wondered if her boss was attracted by her original job as a ding-dong and was willing to risk it, so he encouraged her to become a medical representative. Jia walked home alone, feeling very depressed. She just felt dissatisfied. Why? She thought that with a legitimate job, she would no longer have to go to ding-dong. She didn't expect that selling medicine would have to be a side job. Is there really no other way for a woman to go other than selling herself? The next day, Jia couldn't even read a book. She lay on the bed alone and thought blankly all day. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Vice President Chin grabbed her. At that time, Jia really I wanted to smash the button and stop paying attention to him, but I realized that I actually had no other way to go. If I didn't pay attention to him, I would have no choice but to go back to doing ding-dong and go back to the days of being on tenterhooks. Even Jianqiang had to give up his transportation business with Yilan Ma and his business expansion plans. He went to the hotel lobby or the entrance again. When he saw a man from the mainland, he circled his left hand and his right hand. The index finger kept inserting it, hinting at the other party. No, Jia felt that she could no longer go back. She got up from the bed and walked to the shop to return the call. In the evening, they went to the Nance Huang Hotel. The two of them couldn't afford the luxury package on the 3rd floor, and Jia couldn't afford it. They went to the small box behind the lobby on the 2nd floor. There was a performance going on the stage in the front hall, with 6 or 7 little girls singing and dancing. There was a long passage at the back, and the boxes on both sides of the passage were very quiet. Sitting in it, as long as the TV was turned off, you wouldn't hear anything. Movement in the hall ahead. They didn't turn on the TV, and when all the dishes were served, Vice President Chin and the waiter said, "We'll do it ourselves." The waiter understood. She walked out and closed the door. Jia toasted to Vice President Chin. Vice President Chin did not pick up the cup, but told her to wait a moment. Jia could only put down the cup. For so many days, while Jia was waiting for Vice President Chin's reply, Vice President Chin was also waiting for Jia's further performance, but the result was that he never waited. Vice President Chin was also anxious, and he finally extended his hand. He held Jia's hand, and then leaned closer with his body and face. Jia sat there, her face flushed from holding back. She struggled to break away and said, "Wait, Dean Chin, listen to me." Vice President Tan let go of her and looked at her, and Jia also stared at him. "Say it," Vice President Chin said. Jia's mind was in a state of chaos. Finally, she became cruel and said to herself, "No matter what, I will fight for it." Then, the next words were as if she had grown legs and wings, and they were separated. Opened Jia. "Dean Chin, let me tell you the truth. I used to work as a ding-dong, and sleeping with men was a common occurrence for me. But the day I found this job, I told myself that starting from today, I have to rely on my ability to eat, not my body. I want to wash my hands in a golden basin. Dean Chin, if you recognize me as a friend and can help me, I will be grateful to you forever. Of course, if you think that I can only get this order by sleeping with you, then it doesn't matter. You can book a room right away, or you can stay in this private room, and I will promise you. Really, I really need to get this business." After Jia finished speaking, there was a deathly silence in the box. Vice President Tan did not make any more moves, but drank and ate in silence. Jia said to herself in her heart, it's over, the beautiful doctors and nurses in other hospitals are, so if there are many, there will definitely be a lot of them delivered to his door. He will not sleep with a ding-dong, nor will he do business with a ding-dong." Jia sat there, feeling cold all over. She didn't know how the meal ended. She only remembered that when the waiter came to pay the bill, Jia was about to take out her wallet. For the first time, Vice President Tan stopped her. He said, "I will buy it." Jia's heart skipped a beat and she was completely desperate. After paying the bill, the two of them went downstairs and got into the car. Vice President Chin started the car. In the car, the two of them did not speak. Vice President Chin did not drive the car to any hotel, but drove to Binya village. When the car stopped at that intersection, Vice President Chin didn't even look at Jia and said coldly, "Get off." Jia got out of the car in a daze and panic. Standing beside the car, she felt that her legs were weak. Vice President Chin rolled down the window next to Jia and said to Jia, "You come to my office at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." Then, his car drove away. Jia stood there, not knowing why, her tears flowed down and she couldn't stop them. At 10 o'clock the next morning, Jia arrived at Vice President Chin's office on time. She saw that not only Vice President Chin was in the office, but also the chief of the pharmacy department of their People's Hospital was also here. "People's Hospital, I went in like this," Jia and Zhang Chen said. "Thank you for your monthly votes from Hu, Kong Kong Ru Ye Kong, Daos Hung 123, Fang Kui, UN 11, Book Friends 536 111, Tamagotchi, Maki no Fenga, Forgot Password, and Book Friends 1505161323336392. Thanks for all the votes and reading. Have a good evening everyone." The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2319. It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. Xiaoyu came over. She saw two people on the terrace outside, still lying there chatting. She also walked 3 or 4 meters away from them. Xiaoyu stopped, coughed first, and then walked over. On the table between the two sofas and lounge chairs, a bottle of wine had been finished and the dishes were at the bottom. Xiaoyu asked, "Sister Jia, can I take it away?" Jia said yes. Xiaoyu moved the table and the tableware aside first. She saw that the fire in the open stove on the coffee table had been extinguished, so she lit the open stove again and sat on the water. Then he went back inside, brought a pot of boiling water, made tea for them again, then removed the small table and tableware, and disappeared with them. Zhang Chen asked Jia, "You started doing it from the People's Hospital?" "It's not that simple," Jia said. "Vice President Qin agreed to purchase our medicines. That is just the first step. Once the medicines arrive in the hospital's warehouse, they are not finished yet. The right to prescribe to patients lies with the doctor. Your medicines, the key to sales volume depends on how many drugs the doctor prescribes. Not even the dean can control this. We can't compare with the products of those big foreign pharmaceutical companies. Their medicines are special medicines. You can't use them even if you don't use them." At that time, our domestic pharmaceutical companies had very few new medicines with their own patents. Everyone was producing them. Most of them are commercial products that have passed the patent protection period, or are generic drugs. In the hospital pharmacy, there are more than a dozen of the same type of medicine, such as roxithromycin, with the same efficacy. Which one you use depends on how the doctor prescribes it. If the doctor does not indicate it, then it depends on how the pharmacy distributes the medicine. In the first month after I started working, the actual sales volume was pitiful. A provincial hospital was not as big as a county-level hospital. Later, I went to Dr. Pang for help. He started using my medicines in prescriptions. Then he introduced me to his colleagues, who introduced colleagues to me. Finally, I introduced all the doctors in the People's Hospital. After understanding it, the sales of medicines will be greatly increased. As a medical representative, the most important quality is to be familiar with each other and be able to have a good relationship with everyone. Not only must you have a good relationship with doctors and nurses, but also with hospital administrators. We even have a good relationship with pharmacy warehouse managers. To have a good relationship. Really, despite the fact that the warehouse manager does not have a high status in the hospital, if you don't have a good relationship with him and he makes mischief, it will be enough for you. For example, if your medicine is about to be used up, he will not report it to you. Or delay the application for a day or two, then the goods will be purchased a day or two late. As I said before, you are not the only one with the same type of medicine. If yours is no longer available, just use other medicines. If you have a good relationship, he will help you to keep time well. Before the goods are out of stock here, there will be delivered there. Then he will use this trick to deal with other pharmaceutical companies and make them often out of stock. As soon as they run out of stock, will your sales naturally increase? You have to do a good job in all kinds of relationships. If you do well, you will get money. Zhang Chen asked, "Then are you really like the legend, where doctors prescribe medicines and you all give kickbacks?" That was later. At the beginning, I wasn't so brave. The men would give them cigarettes, and the women would give them chocolates and cosmetics. We would treat them to meals from time to time, and during the night shift, we would give them late-night snacks. If you have children at home, you would take them to KFC for their birthdays. At that time, it was popular to go to KFC for your birthdays. In Hainan, the best thing is to treat them to morning tea. I asked for a private room at a hotel near the hospital. Every day, before the doctors go to work, they go there to have morning tea. After having morning tea, they go to work. When they go to work, they must "I still remember you," the food in my stomach has not been digested yet, so when I wrote the prescription, the tip of the pen must be facing you. Then it's really hard for you. You have to serve them every day, Zhang Chen said with a smile. That's right. I work hard every day with a smile on my face, just like an old lady. It's really not as simple as giving a direct kickback later. Everyone is relaxed. Zhang Chen said, it's not easy. Yes, it was difficult at the beginning, but it got better later, Jia said. People in the hospital are all connected with each other. Our people's hospital has been involved in the work, and the relationship with the people there has been improved. They were happy to help introduce me to their colleagues and other hospitals. Soon, in about half a year, I was admitted to all the hospitals in Haikan. Among all the medical representatives in our factory, I have the best performance. Why? Although the population of Haikan is not comparable to that of big cities such as Shanghai, Beijing, and Guangzhou, one medical representative there can enter 2 or 3 hospitals. It's good to maintain a good relationship. This is the entire Haikan here, and there are still more people than them in total. Then, I worked in places like Sanya, Qionghai, Danzhou, Nada, and at that time Nada, and Wenchang. I worked in all the hospitals in Hainan province. I couldn't handle it all by myself. Jianqiang and Yilan's mother didn't go to any aquatic product terminal to expand their business at that time. They couldn't even deliver medicine to me every day. Besides hospitals, what about pharmacies? I rented a warehouse in Haikan and hired a salesperson. Jianqiang first bought an Isuzu and delivered medicine all over the province. Then he was too busy to do it alone, so he bought a second, third, and fourth car. The car turned into a fleet. After all the hospitals in the province started working on it, I was thinking, since Hainan Island is so big, how else can I expand my business? Later, I still remembered Brother Ganz's trick. Which of his tricks? Zhang Chen became interested and asked, he has been away for many years, what else can he teach you? Yes, the person is gone, but the spirit is still there, Jia giggled. Brother Zhang Chen, do you still remember that when we were eating in the upstairs corridor of Yilan's house, Brother Zanzi always took out his business card and press card, bragging that he was a joint reporter for 6 media outlets? Jia asked. Zhang Chen nodded. Jia said, I just thought, since Brother Gan can be a joint reporter for 6 media, why can't I be a medical representative for multiple pharmaceutical companies? There are so many types of drugs, and no pharmaceutical company can handle all the drugs. They have all been produced, and one family can only produce a few types. I used to go to the hospital with the medicine, but now my hospital has such a good relationship, why can't I go to the pharmaceutical factory according to their needs? Smart, Zhang Chen shouted. Thank you, Jia said with a smile, I just chose. I chose pharmaceutical companies that have no conflict with each other. I went to them. I went to them with sales leads. If any factory was unwilling, they would all sign with me. I signed an agency agreement, and later on, I became even more powerful than Brother Gan. I was the medical representative of 18 pharmaceutical companies, and even foreign companies came to me. When I was at my most powerful, 2/3 of the medicines in all the hospitals in Haikan were supplied by me. That's right. It's a pity that you don't do business, Zhang Chen said. Yes, I regretted it later. If I had known this, why didn't I start doing business earlier, and I still had to live in that kind of life where people are neither human nor ghosts. It seems that people just need to be forced, and they have been forced to that point. Just go up, Jia said. Then why did you think of starting a pharmaceutical factory again? Zhang Chen asked. It was a coincidence, Jia said. Actually, at the beginning, it was not a pharmaceutical factory. It was a factory that made physiological saline under the people's hospital. It was not well run. Think about it, they were just a hospital. How can it be run well if it is produced and sold by itself? When the outpatient building and wards of the hospital were newly built, they wanted to sell the pharmaceutical factory, mainly selling business licenses and permits, as well as some simple equipment. The place where the pharmaceutical factory used to be was planned to be used to build wards. The dean and deputy dean Sheen came to me and asked me to buy the pharmaceutical factory. They didn't have much money, so I bought it. Now that I bought it, I thought, I will do it well. I bought a piece of land in Jinpan Industrial Park and moved the factory there. At the beginning, I still produced physiological saline and delivered it to all hospitals in Haikan. And later the entire island. When the factory got rich, it began to recruit people and expand production. It not only produced physiological saline, but also produced other medicines. Starting from the simplest, I thought, since all your pharmaceutical factories across the country can sell medicines to us coming from Hainan, why can't I produce medicines in Hainan and sell them all over the country? In terms of geographical environment, Hainan cannot produce other products, but it can produce medicines. For other products, transportation is inconvenient. If it is sent out of the island, the freight is too high. Our medicines are not afraid of this, so a little transportation cost is nothing. Hainan, the climate and air are so good, so it is truly unique for producing medicine. I haven't read any books myself, but I know the importance of reading and know that knowledge is money. If nothing else, I just relied on a fake Zhejiang University of Science and Technology and a fake college student title. When I was doing Ding Dong, my business was worse than in addition. Ding Dong's business is good and he does serious things, so that's not even more important. When I have money, I will recruit people. I will go to other companies to recruit people with doctorate and master's degrees from home and abroad. In this regard, I am not stingy at all. In this way, the technical strength of my pharmaceutical factory has become very strong. I am very capable of researching and developing new drugs myself. Now my pharmaceutical factory has 6 national Class I new drugs, 11 Class II drugs, Class 3, 4, F and 6 drugs, and there are even more. By the way, Brother Zhang Chen, I forgot to mention it earlier. While I deliver medicines to hospitals, I also act as an agent for medical devices. I do a good job in this area. After all, my clients are hospitals. I just increase the variety. The people in the hospital also like to deal with me. We all have old relationships with each other. They feel relieved to get some benefits. It is safer than taking it from someone who doesn't know the background, right? After the success of the pharmaceutical factory, I set up a factory to make equipment. As I said before, I made stents and developed our own stents. Now the stents we produce are in short supply, and the price is only 1/5 of the imported stents. First, many patients who could not afford stents can now use our stents. This is what I am most happy about. You really haven't forgotten your original intention. Zhang Chen smiled. Yes, Brother Zhang Chen, you are right. I still remember the stent. I have always remembered it. Vice President Qin is right. The stent implantation surgery was introduced within a few years. Larger hospitals can do it, and I later served as an agent for stents for foreigners. When I had the ability, of course I did it myself, Jia said. Thank you for the tips of Brokeback Mountain, 2 fishes, and Wooden Floor HD. Thank you Lao Chantang, Yuzazialiu, on the road to a nation, hu, really annoying, Shi Yitan, Jinwu Lanji, Bing Hai Greedy Chong, FMC 196804424, Mike, Shi Fangxian, Quadratic VC, Wooden Floor HD, Lao Shenza Sang, Captain Jim, Nailan 18, you know whether a book is good or not, 4 + 1 = 5, Tamagotchi, QTDJB, Frivolous, Lusandeo, 999 Little Stupid Cow 999, Humor Tribe, Zipanjiang 1, Cloth Thread, Donglongdong, Romantic Sakura Kinfanchu, Void Broken Dreams, Rainman, Zongkai 727. Chien Dad, Zizhiwu, Book Friends 202112092123072776, Book Friends 202203241858433375 monthly tickets. Thanks for all the votes and reading. I wish you all good health. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2320. Are you sleepy, brother Zhang Chen? Jia asked Zhang Chen. Zhang Chen shook his head and said he was not sleepy. What are your arrangements next? Jia asked again. Zhang Chen said, since Zhang Xiangbei is fine, I want to go to Sanya. I haven't been to Sanya for a long time. I will stay in Sanya for a day and then go back to Hangzhou from Sanya. Okay, I'll drive you there, Jia said. No, it's not like we won't see each other again. It's a lot of trouble to send her back and forth. I'll take the high-speed rail. When I get to Sanya, they will pick me up at the station, Zhang Chen hurriedly told Jia. Okay, brother Zhang Chen, don't be anxious later. Don't set the alarm clock. Just sleep until you wake up naturally. If it's late, just leave tomorrow. I'll take you to our company and 2 factories. There I work overtime all night, Jia said. Zhang Chen said yes, I don't care about this day or 2. After the 2 people finished talking, they suddenly fell into silence. Although they were not tired after talking for a whole night, once the topic was interrupted, they both didn't know where to start. They were half lying on the recliner, both of them had their eyes open, looking at everything in front of him blankly. The sky is getting brighter and brighter, and the half of the moon has tilted to one side, condensing its furry edges and becoming smooth and transparent. The moonlight shines on the sea, washing out the entire sea surface and becoming clearly visible. On the contrary, the sea surface, the few lights on the ceiling dimmed. Brother Zhang Chen, Jia called. Zhang Chen said Ask you a person, Jia said. Who? Jin Lily, Sister Lily, do you still remember her? Zhang Chen smiled bitterly and said, how could I not remember? Do you know where she is now? Jia asked. Zhang Chen shook his head, I don't know, maybe she is abroad. I heard people say that she seems to have gone to the United States. I didn't make it, Jia said. What did you say? I said that Sister Lily did not go to the United States. She did go through the procedures to go to the United States and was ready to go to the United States, but she was stopped at the Guangzhou airport. Why? Jia sat up on the recliner, looked at Zhang Chen and said. The guy named Xia who was with her was arrested. Sister Lily was stopped when going through customs at Guangzhou airport. But fortunately, the guy named Xia was not a bastard. He did everything by himself. I took it over and did not involve Jin Lily, so Jin Lily stayed in for a few days and then came out. Zhang Chen also sat up, turned around, looked at Jia and asked, Jia, who did you hear this from? How do you know this? Zhang Chen remembered that when he and Jin Lily broke up, Jia and Ji Unqiang had already moved away from Yilan's house, but they hadn't moved away. Jia and Jin Lily didn't have much interaction in the first place. What happened to Jin Lily later made even him, I don't know, how could Jia know? Jia also turned around and looked at Zhang Chen. She smiled and said, of course I know. Sister Lily is at my place now. She is the general manager of my company. Ah, Zhang Chen was surprised and asked, what's going on? Sister Lily was stopped at Guangzhou airport, and was later taken to Beijing by the Beijing police. The case of Xia was handled by the Beijing police. After Sister Lily was released, she would definitely not be able to go to the United States, and she would not have the money to go. The person is fine, but most of the money has been handed over, leaving only the portion of her salary. Sister Lily can't go to the United States, and she feels ashamed to go back to her hometown. People in her hometown always thought that she had gone to the United States. In fact, she came back to Heiken. In Heiken, she worked in all kinds of jobs, including accounting, and I worked as a store manager, sales manager, and sold houses. I also worked as the deputy general manager of a hotel for 2 years. It should be 14, no, it was 15 years ago. Our company was recruiting, and she also signed up. On the day of the recruitment, I just came back from a business trip. I happened to have nothing to do, so I went to the recruitment site and heard the company's personnel shouting, "Jin Lily." I thought this name was so familiar. Then when someone walked in, I saw Sister Lily. Sister Lily also saw me, and she turned around and left. I quickly chased her out and grabbed her. When she signed up, she didn't know that the company recruiting people was mine. At that time, she only knew that my name was Gia, but she didn't know my full name. When she saw she turned around and left because she felt embarrassed. Of course I know why. When we were at Yilan's house, neither you nor Brother Ganzi had this intention, but Sister Lily, she has always looked down on me. I pulled her and told her frankly that after so many years, why do we still care about what we do? Sister Lily and I told her that I need to run around the country, and the family really lacks someone like her who I can as a person I trust. I ask her to come to my company no matter what. Sister Lily finally agreed. After joining, she worked step by step from the office director to her current position as the general manager of the group company. As you know, Sister Lily is very capable. Zhang Chen nodded and asked, "How is she now?" "Good. Have a family?" "Yes, I have a son. He just entered junior high school this year. Her husband is the general manager of a factory below us." "She is still in charge of her husband," Gia said with a smile. Zhang Chen also smiled. "Brother Zhang Chen. Do you want to meet Sister Lily?" Gia looked at Zhang Chen and asked. Zhang Chen thought for a moment, then looked at Gia and said seriously, "I think it's better to forget it. We all have our own lives, so why bother?" Gia nodded, turned back, and lay down on the recliner again. She said softly, "I have thought about it. I thought you would make such a decision, Brother Zhang Chen." Zhang Chen also lay down again and said with a smile, "What else do you think of?" "I think of a lot." Gia paused for a while and emphasized, "Many, many." "A lot of what?" Zhang Chen asked. Gia did not answer and remained silent. Zhang Chen turned around and saw Gia with her eyes open and staring blankly at the glass ceiling. Zhang Chen asked, Gia, what are you thinking about?" "Things from the past," Gia said. Zhang Chen turned back and looked at the top of the glass ceiling. After staring, he saw a few stars looming in the sky above his head. "Brother Zhang Chen," Gia called. "Yeah," Zhang Chen responded. "Let me tell you something, okay?" "Okay, you say." Gia hesitated for a while and said softly, "In the past, I slept with so many men, all for the purpose of making money and living. Only once, there was one person who I volunteered for, and I liked him very much." Zhang Chen held his breath and said nothing. Gia seemed to be waiting for Zhang Chen's response, but Zhang Chen remained silent. Gia stood up and walked into the house. Zhang Chen gently closed his eyes. After a while, he heard Gia coming back, walking close and standing in front of him. Zhang Chen didn't open his eyes, but he could feel it. Ding bell, ding bell. Zhang Chen heard a string of bells and his heart trembled. He opened his eyes and saw Gia holding a bunch of small bells strung with red ropes in her hand. Gia stretched out her hand and said to Zhang Chen, "Brother Zhang Chen, I'll give this to you as a souvenir." Zhang Chen's face turned red. Thank you Winson Liu for the tip. Thank you for your monthly votes from Huaxin Yongxiao, Liao Hanming, Feng Konghu 1974, No Future, Just Remember the Original Intention, Lao Chentang, Book Friends 202007312053033948, and Book Friends 202011091113511923. Thanks for all the votes and reading. Have a good evening everyone. The Pentium Era, South to North. Author, Mei Shi Niang. Chapter 2322. Chapter 2322. The new book Wandering in the Vast Daylight has been released, welcome to read it. Thanks.